The hall glowed under hundreds of soft golden lights. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and the audience waited for the next award. It was the Global Humanitarian Film Ceremony, a night meant to honor kindness behind the camera. Every major actor sat dressed in elegance, but all eyes kept finding one man sitting quietly in the third row. Keanu Reeves looked thoughtful, almost distant, his calm eyes fixed on the stage. He was known for avoiding attention, yet tonight he seemed even quieter than usual. Beside him, a small card lay on his seat, with the words written in simple letters, "Tribute segment, Keanu Reeves." The announcer's voice echoed through the microphone. Our next honor goes to a woman whose heart has touched countless lives, Sandra Bullock. The crowd erupted in applause. Sandra walked on stage, smiling gently, waving at familiar faces. She looked radiant but humble, her words simple as she thanked her crew, her fans, and the people who inspired her. She had always believed in kindness, in helping others silently, but no one knew that tonight her story was about to take a turn she never expected. After her speech, the announcer smiled and said, "We have a surprise guest who wishes to share something about Sandra." The lights shifted toward the audience, and the camera stopped on Keanu. For a second, he looked confused, almost caught off guard. Then he slowly stood, his black suit catching the soft glow of the spotlights. The room went silent as he walked to the stage. Sandra's expression softened, a quiet mix of warmth and curiosity. She whispered, "Keanu?" But he only smiled gently and took the microphone. His first words were calm but heavy with emotion. "I was not planning to speak tonight," he said softly, "but there are some truths that wait for years to be told." The audience leaned forward. Even the camera operators froze, sensing something rare was unfolding. Keanu took a breath and looked toward Sandra. "Many people see the movies, the laughter, the awards, but very few know the kind of person you are when the lights are off." He paused for a moment as if collecting his thoughts. "Years ago," he continued, "during one of our early film shoots, something happened that I never forgot. A crew member fainted from exhaustion under the hot sun. Everyone panicked, everyone shouted, but Sandra knelt beside him without a word. She gave him water, held his hand, and stayed there until help arrived. No reporters were there, no cameras. That was the first time I saw real kindness." The hall remained silent. Sandra looked down, her eyes shining slightly, remembering that day. Keanu's voice grew softer, but it wasn't the last time. "Over the years, I saw how you would quietly take care of people, how you donated to crew families who could not afford hospital bills, how you stayed late just to make sure everyone got home safely. You never said a word about it." "Not once!" The host looked speechless. The audience seemed frozen between admiration and curiosity. What was happening felt bigger than an award speech. It felt personal, raw, and real. Keanu continued, his tone changing slightly, becoming deeper and more reflective. "But there's something you don't know, Sandra. Something I've carried with me for years. And tonight, I think it's time you hear it." The words created a wave of suspense. Sandra's smile faded into confusion. The crowd leaned closer. The camera zoomed on Keanu's face, calm yet trembling with quiet emotion. "There was a night," he said slowly, "when I was at my lowest. I had lost people I loved. I had no strength left for movies, for life, for anything. I felt invisible. I had decided to leave everything behind." His voice cracked slightly, but he did not stop. "And then," he said, "my phone rang. An unknown number. A woman's voice said just one line, 'The world still needs your light.'" Then the call ended. His eyes glistened. "That sentence changed my life. It made me wake up. It made me stand again." Sandra's lips parted slightly. Something about those words seemed familiar. The audience felt the weight of the moment, the silence, the mystery, the question hanging between them. Keanu looked down for a second, his hand gripping the microphone, and then he said softly, "I never knew who that voice belonged to, until a few months ago." Gasps rippled through the audience. Sandra blinked in shock. Her hand covered her mouth. Keanu turned his head toward her, eyes filled with warmth and tears at once. The air felt heavier, the suspense almost painful. "And now," he said, his voice trembling, "I realized that voice was yours." The lights dimmed slightly, and the cameras caught the raw emotion on both their faces. Sandra whispered, "Keanu, what are you saying?" But he only nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "You called me that night. You saved me without even knowing it. I am standing here because of those words." The hall fell into complete silence. No one clapped, no one spoke. Even the sound of breath seemed to vanish. Sandra stood frozen, tears gathering in her eyes, realizing that something she did long ago, something she had forgotten, had saved a life. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I didn't know it was you." Keanu smiled gently. "I know. That's what makes it kindness." The audience rose slowly, not from ceremony but from pure emotion. Even those behind cameras wiped tears. Sandra took a step forward, holding Keanu's hand. Her voice trembled. "You remember every word," he nodded. "How could I forget the voice that gave me back my life?" For a long moment, no one spoke. Their hands remained joined, their eyes locked, not in romance but in deep gratitude. The world watched two souls connected by compassion, one who had given hope without knowing, and one who had carried it all these years. As the lights glowed softly again, Keanu said his final line for the night. "This is not an award speech. This is a thank you. Some people change your career, some people change your soul." The crowd stood, clapping not for fame but for humanity. The night that began as another award ceremony had turned into something far greater. A lesson on unseen kindness and silent respect. The host stepped forward with tears in her eyes, saying quietly, "Ladies and gentlemen, that was not a performance. That was truth." The audience cheered, but Sandra only hugged Keanu tightly, whispering, "You were the light too. You just forgot." And he replied softly, "You reminded me." The cameras kept rolling, but no one cared about fame anymore. It was one of those rare moments when humanity felt larger than everything else. That night became a story the world would never forget. The night Keanu's confession turned into the most emotional moment of his life. The next morning, news outlets across the world played the same clip. It showed Keanu Reeves on stage, his voice trembling as he confessed how Sandra Bullock once saved his life without even knowing it. The moment had already been called the most emotional speech of the year. Millions of viewers replayed it, many crying as they watched two friends share a bond beyond fame. But behind all that attention, both Keanu and Sandra woke up quietly, lost in thoughts of what the night had brought back. Keanu sat near his window, watching the soft morning light. His phone was filled with unread messages. He ignored them all and kept staring outside. His heart was heavy, not from sadness but from gratitude. For years, he had carried that memory like a private scar. Now it was open, raw, and strangely freeing. Yet deep down, a quiet question still lingered. What made Sandra call him that night, all those years ago? Sandra, meanwhile, stood in her kitchen, her coffee untouched. She had not planned to attend the after-party. She could not. Her mind kept returning to the words he said. "You gave me back my life." The idea that a simple call, a few words spoken in concern, had carried such meaning left her speechless. She tried to remember that night clearly, the reason she called, but memory played tricks. She only remembered one thing. She had felt a strange worry that evening, like an instinct. The suspense grew inside her heart. What if there was more to that night than she ever knew? Later that day, Sandra decided to visit Keanu. She arrived without warning, her car stopping outside his quiet house surrounded by trees. When he opened the door, both stood silent for a moment. No cameras, no reporters, just two people connected by a story that neither fully understood. She smiled softly and said, "I thought I should see how you are." He nodded and replied, "I'm still trying to understand what happened last night." They sat by his piano, the sunlight falling gently through the curtains. Keanu spoke first. "I meant every word," he said. "That call saved me. But there's one thing I still don't know. Why did you call me that night?" Sandra hesitated, her eyes distant. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "I was home after a long shoot. I remember sitting alone thinking about a friend who looked broken that week. I didn't even plan to call, it just happened. Maybe it was something stronger than thought." Keanu nodded slowly. Maybe kindness knows before we do. His words hung in the air like a quiet truth. Sandra smiled weakly, but then her face turned thoughtful. There's something else, she said. I always wondered why your voice sounded strange that night. I didn't recognize it as you, but something inside told me to speak those words. Her words made Keanu pause. What do you mean you didn't recognize me? He asked. She explained that his number hadn't appeared on the screen. It was a blocked caller ID. She had answered it by chance, expecting someone else. Then she heard silence, then a sigh, and something told her it was a person who needed light. She had simply spoken the first thing that came to her heart. She never knew it had reached him. The realization deepened the mystery. Keanu looked stunned. So you didn't even know it was me? You were just helping a stranger? Sandra nodded. I guess so. Maybe the universe wanted it that way. For a long time, they sat in silence. It was as if fate had written this story years ago, waiting for both to finally understand it. After a few minutes, Keanu said softly, That night, I was sitting alone by the lake. I had lost someone close, and I had lost myself too. Your call came exactly when I was about to give up. I still remember your voice clearly. I thought it was something divine, not human. Maybe it was both. Sandra listened with tears in her eyes. The pain in his voice carried the weight of years. She reached out and placed her hand over his. You were meant to stay, she said gently. The world wasn't ready to lose you. The emotional silence returned, stronger now, like a quiet ocean between them. Keanu looked down, then smiled faintly. Funny thing, he said. The night after that call, I started writing again. I picked up my guitar. I talked to people again. I felt like I had a reason. Sandra smiled. Then maybe those few words weren't just for you. Maybe they were for both of us. The afternoon stretched peacefully, but there was still an unspoken weight in the room, a feeling that the story was not yet complete. Just as Sandra was about to leave, Keanu said something unexpected. You know, he began, when I finally checked the phone records years later, I saw something strange. The call didn't show up on the log. Not on mine, not on anyone's. I thought maybe I imagined it. Sandra froze, her eyes widening slightly. You mean it doesn't exist? He nodded. Only the message remained. The suspense deepened. Sandra's hands trembled slightly. But I made that call. I remember dialing it, Keanu replied, and I remember hearing it, yet neither of us can prove it. Both laughed nervously, unsure whether to fear or admire what had happened. Keanu finally said, Maybe kindness doesn't always leave evidence. She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. Maybe it leaves purpose instead. Before leaving, Sandra turned at the door and said, You know what, Keanu? Last night, when you spoke those words, it felt like time stopped. It reminded me why I do what I do. Not for awards, not for fame, but for moments like that. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. You gave me a reason to believe again, Sandra. I hope I can do the same for someone else someday. She smiled warmly. You already have. As she left, Keanu watched her car disappear down the road. He felt peaceful yet restless, as if something larger was guiding them both toward an unfinished truth. He walked back inside and looked at his old phone resting on the table. The same one from that night, still kept in a drawer like a quiet witness. He picked it up, and for a brief second he thought he saw the screen flicker, displaying one faint word. Light. His eyes softened, and a small tear escaped. Maybe it was his imagination, or maybe it was the universe reminding him that kindness never really fades. The wind outside rustled gently through the trees and somewhere deep in his heart. Keanu knew this was only the beginning of a story that was far from over. The next few days passed quietly, but neither Keanu nor Sandra could shake the feeling that something deeper hid behind their shared story. The moment on stage had moved the world, yet it had also reopened memories they both thought were gone. Interviews, fan letters, and endless calls poured in, but they ignored all of it. Both of them were drawn toward a truth that still felt unfinished. On the third night after the ceremony, Keanu sat alone in his home office surrounded by stacks of old scripts, half-written notes, and a single vintage cassette player. It was something he had kept since his early acting days, filled with voice recordings of lines, thoughts, and songs. He used to record everything back then, even conversations that meant something to him. Suddenly, a memory flashed. That night by the lake, when the unknown voice told him the world still needs your light, he had left the recorder running. His heart began to race. He opened the old drawer, pulled out a small, dusty box, and found the cassette marked October Night. His fingers trembled slightly as he placed it in the player. He pressed play. A soft crackle filled the air, followed by faint sounds of water and wind. Then came his younger voice, low and broken. "I don't think I can do this anymore," the recording said. A long silence followed. Then, clearly and gently, came a woman's voice. "The world still needs your light." Keanu froze. His hands shook. The voice was unmistakable. It was Sandra's. Even through the static, her tone carried warmth and truth. He played it again and again, his eyes filling with tears. It was real. The call was not a dream, and somehow he had proof now. Proof that kindness had found him exactly when he needed it most. He picked up his phone, but before calling Sandra, he hesitated. Part of him wanted to keep it private, to treasure it quietly as a sacred memory. But another part knew she deserved to hear it. So he sent her a simple message. "Can I show you something tomorrow?" The next afternoon, Sandra arrived. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, just her calm smile. "You sounded serious," she said softly as she stepped in. Keanu nodded and led her to the room. On the table sat the cassette player. He didn't speak. He just pressed play. The crackle began again. The same sound of the lake, the same wind. Then her voice filled the room. "The world still needs your light." Sandra gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes widened, glistening with emotion. She whispered, That's me." Keanu nodded slowly. "You see? It really happened. The night, the call, everything." She stared at him, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. "But how did you record it?" she asked. Keanu explained how he had left the cassette running on the table that night, not even realizing it captured the moment that changed his life. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, listening to that single sentence repeat again and again, like an echo from another world. The air in the room felt alive, filled with gratitude and awe. It was as if kindness itself had left behind a voice for them to remember. After a while, Sandra said softly, "Do you know what's strange? I don't remember owning that phone anymore. It was a temporary line I used for only a few weeks. After that, it was gone. I never even saved the number." Keanu looked thoughtful. "Maybe that's why there's no record of the call. It came from a line that doesn't exist anymore." But then something even more mysterious happened. As the cassette reached its end, another faint voice appeared. One they had never heard before. It was neither of them. It said quietly, "Every act of kindness finds its way home." Both of them looked at each other, stunned. The room seemed to grow quieter. Sandra whispered, "Who said that?" Keanu rewound it, played it again, but the line was still there. The voice was soft, aged, and warm, like someone speaking from another time. They searched the tape for explanations, but found none. It ended exactly there. Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe it was interference. Or maybe, he paused, someone was listening that night too. Sandra looked at him with wonder. Maybe kindness has its own voice, Keanu. They both laughed softly, but inside they felt something sacred had been revealed. Not only had they found proof of the call, but also a message greater than either of them. That single act of compassion had not just saved one man's spirit, it had echoed through time itself. Later that evening, Sandra sat quietly in her car, watching the sunset. The golden light reflected off the rearview mirror, and she thought about the voice on the tape. Every act of kindness finds its way home. Those words wouldn't leave her mind. She picked up her phone and typed a note. If kindness can echo through time, maybe we can help it travel faster. The next day, she called Keanu again. "I have an idea," she said with a spark in her voice. "What if we start something? Something small but real. A movement that encourages people to do one anonymous act of kindness a day. No names, no credits. Just hearts helping hearts." Keanu listened silently, a small smile forming. "You mean turn that one sentence into something that lives forever?" She nodded. "Exactly. A chain of kindness. Maybe call it the Light Project." Keanu's voice grew soft. Let's do it. They spent hours planning. They decided to record short stories of real people helped by strangers, share them freely online, and remind the world that kindness doesn't need fame to matter. Each video would end with the same line from that mysterious voice. Every act of kindness finds its way home. Neither of them knew that. This small project was about to touch millions of lives and lead to a moment that would become even more emotional than the night of his confession. But for now, the two friends simply sat under the fading sunlight, their hearts at peace, unaware that their journey had just begun again. The following weeks felt like a quiet storm of inspiration. Sandra and Keanu worked together every day, not for fame or promotion, but for something pure. They called their idea the Light Project, a simple online initiative to spread stories of anonymous kindness. There were no sponsors, no media partnerships, and no logos. It was built on one belief, that kindness could be the loudest thing in silence. They rented a small recording studio in Los Angeles, not far from where they had filmed their first movie years ago. It was the same neighborhood that had seen them grow from young dreamers to global stars. Now, it would witness them create something that belonged to the world, not to Hollywood. The first video was simple, a short clip of Keanu speaking in his calm, honest voice. He said, "You don't have to change the world to make it brighter. You just have to light one corner of it." Then a fade to black, followed by the sentence that had started it all. Every act of kindness finds its way home. They uploaded the video quietly without announcements. No hashtags, no teasers, just a message meant for anyone who needed it. Within 24 hours, it had reached millions. People from every country began commenting their own stories of kindness. A stranger who helped during a storm, a neighbor who shared food, a teacher who believed in a forgotten student. Sandra sat beside Keanu, scrolling through the flood of comments. "Look at this," she said softly. "A man in Japan says he decided not to give up on life because of our video." Keanu leaned closer, reading silently. His eyes glistened. "It's working," he whispered. "The light is traveling." Soon, schools started using the Light Project in their classrooms. Companies played it during team meetings. Even hospitals broadcasted it in waiting rooms. The world seemed to pause just for a moment to remember that kindness still existed. But with success came attention. News outlets wanted interviews. Journalists wanted behind-the-scenes footage. One evening, a major television network requested both of them to appear on a live talk show. Keanu refused at first, saying, "This isn't about us." But Sandra convinced him. "Maybe if we talk, more people will join." Maybe it's not about being seen, it's about being heard. They agreed, but they planned to say only the truth. No dramatic edits, no rehearsed lines. They would speak from their hearts. The night of the interview arrived. The studio lights glowed bright. The audience clapped as Sandra and Keanu walked on stage. The host smiled warmly. "The world has seen your project, and it's spreading faster than anything we've covered before. Tell us what inspired it." Keanu took a deep breath. "A phone call," he said simply. The audience quieted. He continued, "Years ago, when I was lost, someone told me that the world still needed my light. That one sentence saved me. We made this project to pass that light forward." The host looked touched. "And that voice, was it you, Sandra?" She nodded softly. "I didn't know it was him that night." Sometimes kindness happens before recognition. The audience applauded gently. Then the host asked, "There's a rumor you discovered something mysterious on an old tape. Is that true?" Sandra and Keanu exchanged glances. He smiled slightly. "Yes," he said, "a tape that reminded us that kindness doesn't vanish. It echoes." The crowd waited, sensing something deep. Sandra leaned toward the microphone. "We heard a voice saying, 'Every act of kindness finds its way home,' and that voice became the heart of our message." The audience erupted in applause. People stood up, some even crying. The host ended the segment by saying, "Thank you for reminding us what being human really means." After the show, as they walked backstage, a young woman from the production team approached them hesitantly. She held a small USB drive and said, "This might sound strange, but I think I can help you find out where that mysterious voice came from." Keanu and Sandra exchanged curious looks. "How?" Keanu asked. The woman explained that she was an audio technician and had been analyzing sound patterns from viral videos as a hobby. I recognize something unusual in your tape recording, she said. The background hum, it matches a very old radio frequency used for public broadcasts in the early 1980s. Someone must have recorded over it later. Maybe the voice was from that original broadcast. The idea shocked them both, Sandra whispered. So the voice could belong to someone from decades ago? The woman nodded. Yes, someone who once said that line long before either of you. Keanu looked thoughtful. Can you find the original source? She smiled. I think I already have. She handed them the USB drive. It's an archive clip from a forgotten humanitarian radio program called Light Lines. It aired once in 1984, hosted by a man who believed in anonymous good deeds. His last recorded message ended with the exact same sentence: "Every act of kindness finds its way home." The revelation left them speechless. The mysterious voice was not supernatural after all, but something real. Something from a kind soul who lived decades earlier and spoke words that somehow reached across time. Later that night, they watched the restored footage together. It showed an elderly man with kind eyes sitting in a dim studio, speaking into an old microphone. His voice was gentle. If you ever feel unseen, do something kind for someone else. That act will always return, even if you never notice it. Every act of kindness finds its way home. Keanu turned off the screen slowly. The silence that followed felt holy. Sandra whispered, "Maybe the Light Project didn't start with us at all." He smiled. "Maybe we were just carrying the torch." They sat in quiet respect for the man whose message had unknowingly changed their lives decades later. Both of them felt tears rise, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Sandra finally said, "We need to find his family. They deserve to know how his words saved so many people." Keanu nodded, and maybe that's where the final chapter of our story begins. They had started a movement that reignited hope in millions. Now, the path was leading them backward, to the origin of kindness itself. Neither of them could have guessed that what they would discover next would turn the project's story into something far more emotional than the night of his confession. The next morning, Keanu and Sandra began searching for the man behind the radio broadcast. The only clue they had was a faded label on the audio archive. Light Lines 1984. Host, James Halden. Keanu searched old databases while Sandra contacted a small radio history group online. After hours of calling and reading, they discovered something touching. James Halden had been a retired teacher who started the show to spread positivity during a difficult time in his country. He passed away more than 20 years ago, leaving behind a daughter named Elena who lived in a quiet coastal town. Without cameras or public attention, they decided to visit her. When they arrived, Elena was surprised to see them but invited them in kindly. Her home was filled with old photographs and radios of every shape and size. When Sandra mentioned Light Lines, Elena smiled softly. "That was my father's dream," she said. "He believed that if people heard one kind message a day, the world would heal faster." Keanu told her how her father's words had saved his life and inspired the Light Project. She listened in silence, her eyes full of tears. "He used to say one day, 'Those words will reach someone who truly needs them,'" she whispered. She walked to an old wooden box and brought out a dusty reel. "This was his final broadcast," she said. "It never aired. The station closed that same week. I've never played it for anyone." She handed it to Keanu. "If his voice helped you, then maybe this recording will help someone else." Later, back in Los Angeles, they restored the reel. The voice of James Halden filled the room once again, calm, warm, and eternal. "To whoever hears this in the future," he said, "remember the smallest kindness carries farther than any fame. Light travels beyond time, so keep it alive." Sandra wiped her tears. "We will," she whispered. They decided to release the final message as a tribute video, not under their names, but under his. The world reacted with overwhelming love. The Light Project became a symbol of timeless compassion, now connected across generations, as the video ended with his voice repeating every act of kindness finds its way home. People around the world lit candles, shared stories, and promised to carry the light forward. Keanu watched quietly, tears in his eyes. Maybe that's what life really is, he said softly, passing the light from one heart to another. Sandra smiled. And now it's home. Weeks passed, but the world did not stop talking about the Light Project. Everywhere Keanu and Sandra went, they saw small signs of it. A bakery giving free bread to the hungry. A child leaving notes of hope for hospital workers. A man in a crowded subway helping an old woman find her way. Kindness had become a quiet revolution, spreading faster than fame itself. Keanu and Sandra never claimed ownership. They stayed silent, watching the movement grow on its own. People believed the message, not the faces behind it. That was exactly what they had hoped for. One evening, the Global Humanitarian Film Committee announced a special tribute event, a celebration of those who sparked kindness worldwide. They invited Keanu and Sandra, unaware that both of them had planned to attend only as guests, not speakers. As the ceremony began, the host spoke emotionally about how the Light Project had inspired millions. Stories from around the world played on the screen. Strangers rescuing each other during floods, children collecting coins for schools, doctors helping without charge. Each clip ended with the same message. Every act of kindness finds its way home. The audience stood, applauding. When the lights came back on, the host smiled. "Tonight," he said, "we have two guests whose humility has changed countless lives." The camera turned toward them. Keanu and Sandra looked surprised, almost embarrassed, as the audience urged them to come on stage. Keanu whispered to Sandra, "I thought we were done with speeches." She smiled. "Maybe kindness isn't." As they walked up, applause filled the hall. Keanu took the microphone, his expression calm but deeply emotional. "We never meant to start a movement," he began softly. "We only wanted to say thank you to a voice that once saved me, and to a world that decided to carry that voice forward." He paused, glancing toward Sandra. "She reminded me what kindness looks like when no one is watching. And I only did what anyone would do, tell the truth." Sandra looked at him, her eyes warm. "And you reminded me," she said, "that one small act can live forever." The crowd listened in silence. Keanu continued, his voice shaking slightly. "Tonight, I want to make one last confession. When I first shared that story, I thought I was thanking one person. But now I realize I was thanking everyone who ever chose kindness instead of silence. That call, that moment was never about me. It was about all of us, choosing light when life feels dark." The hall went quiet. Even the cameras stopped moving. Sandra stepped closer, taking his hand. "You said once that some people change your career, and some change your soul," she whispered. "You changed mine too." Keanu smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "Then I guess we both found our light." The audience rose in a standing ovation. People wiped tears not because of fame, but because they had witnessed something rare, two souls showing the world that humanity still mattered. As the music swelled, the screen behind them lit up unexpectedly. A black-and-white photograph of James Halden appeared, the man who had spoken the words decades earlier. Beneath it, glowing letters read, "Thank you for keeping the light alive." Sandra covered her mouth, overcome with emotion. Keanu stared at the screen, speechless. It felt like the circle was complete. The man who began it, the woman who carried it, and the one who shared it, all connected through time. The host's voice trembled as he said, "The legacy of kindness continues tonight." He handed them a small crystal lamp, the award for humanitarian impact. It glowed softly, warm and golden. Keanu held it gently, then handed it to Sandra. "This belongs to every person who chose to care," he said softly. She nodded, placing her hand over his. Then something unexpected happened. The audience began lighting small lamps placed under their seats. One by one, hundreds of golden lights filled the hall, shining softly like stars. The sight was breathtaking. Sandra whispered, "Look, Keanu, it's the light. It found its way home." His eyes shimmered. "And maybe," he said quietly, "that's all we ever needed to do. Remind the world that kindness always returns. They stood hand in hand under the glowing lamps as the audience rose in silence. No music, no applause, just quiet respect. It was not a celebration of fame. It was a celebration of the human heart. The next morning, every news outlet called it the most emotional moment of Keanu Reeves's life. But to him, it was something else. It was peace. The kind that comes when you realize that even the smallest act can save someone. Somewhere, someday. Later that night, as Keanu sat alone near his window, he whispered softly, "Thank you, Sandra." And somewhere, perhaps beyond time, the old recording echoed back faintly, "The world still needs your light, and for the first time in years." Keanu smiled fully, knowing the light had finally come home.